Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Dan Sitton of Guardian Technology Group. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, CJ. It's good to be here.
Dan, we've been talking about doing an episode, or at least been talking mostly about things that are tied to FFIEC and the announcement of the CAT assessment going away in August of 2025. And I thought it'd be a good idea to have this conversation, and you and I have gone back and forth on this as it pertains to, well, what does that mean for banks that have been, annually going through the CAT assessment and, measuring their maturity in the cybersecurity space against that model? And, we talked about the announcement, how they kind of went into detail of like, basically, we don't want to compete anymore with what we see as the maturity of other frameworks, sort of saying, hey, this CSF version 2 and CIS top 18 and so on and so forth. But I think, and I'd love you to elaborate a little bit. One of the things that you pointed out, and I agree, is, well, what about the things that banks have been measuring for that are no longer found in those frameworks that are currently being maintained and moving forward?
Yeah, so we both have a lot of questions, CJ. So,
Right.
and so far they haven't released anything specifically. So, just to give like a quick overview in case somebody's not familiar with the CAT, the FFIEC CAT. It's a cybersecurity assessment tool for the FFIEC, which governs and regulates the banking industry. And it's like 513 questions that each bank has to go through. They answer those questions with a multitude of different domains. The 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 way that you answer the questions says whether you're like sub baseline. Baseline means that you've got to do at least this. And
You're
then
meeting the minimum requirement.
yes, and then it goes to evolving, and then it goes to so on and so forth, advanced, and it lets you see where you're at. Now there is tools out there that are like actually like Tandem that will tell you how you compare to your peers of
Sure.
same asset size and
Sort of
things like
a
that. But
radar with your industry, right?
yeah,
Like
it's an awesome tool. Oh, and I mean, there's banks that I mean they live in. I mean, there's banks that just do a whole groan whenever they have to do it. But at the same time, um, it's a great tool. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. Our big question is so if we do a gap analysis or if we take like any of the major 3 or 4 frameworks and we compare it against the FFIEC CAT, what happens with those pieces that fall outside that are
sure.
in the FFIEC? Let's say we use NIST CSF 2.0 or CIS 8, and you've got this group of different controls that are no longer that don't fit inside one of these frameworks or one of the frameworks. What happens to those controls that are just laying out there that are no longer being uh, looked at or managed or maintained? Is that going to be an expectation for the examiners? Are they going to is it since it's in the FFIEC IT workbooks and handbooks, they're
Right.
just going to expect you to do it regardless? I don't
You
know.
know,
The
I call that the implied or the unwritten, I think has been around for a long time. But specifically to your point, the thing that concerns me is the lack of direction around that as far as a public announcement, right? Like, hey, here's some options. We're not going to tell you which one you should use, but here's some options. And you're like, well, these are very different options
mhm.
in the way both that they were written for the audience they were written for, and the spirit of the way in which they approached the prescriptive outcomes, like, hey, minimum objective is X. Well, not all industries would have the same. If we were having a conversation in the break room and you're banking and I'm, retail, they're not necessarily going to be, close enough together to be like, oh yeah, your minimum objective and mine are identical. There's a lot more at stake feasibly for the bank than there is for the mom and the mom and pop's retail shop.
Yeah, and the other thing is the National Credit Union Association has still not come out with a statement saying that they're going to no longer uh, use the cat. Uh, as
So we
far
could
as
have a
concerned,
fork in the road here with
yeah,
credit unions versus
as far as
banking.
they're concerned right now, and the credit unions are concerned from the like the just talking to different people that I've they're still using the cat, the FFIEC cat until well, I don't know what they plan on doing, but because I know that they're going to retire it, but they still NCUA has not came out with a statement saying that we are no longer using the cat, the FFIEC cat, and that you should start looking at other. I think that what they're going to do, especially examiners next year, just from I've been in banking for 20 years and worked with examiners from the state and the federal level every year for I don't know how long, but I think that they're going to do like if it's in the handbook, because there's multiple different handbooks with in different domains of
Sure.
cybersecurity and IT management. Um, I think they're going to say if it's in the handbook, then there's going to be an expectation, and they're going to do kind of a best effort, uh, and they'll know that there's going to be like some growing pains there because these risks that we're these concerns that we're talking about. There's no way before that statement was released that they didn't come up by somebody,
Right.
uh, and and was I don't understand either why there wasn't more guidance because if you look at the FFIEC handbooks and the work programs that the auditors use, they're both available on the FFIEC website. I mean, they are very, very uh, concise and um, I mean, there's tons of documentation
Right.
out there. They're usually really good about putting out stuff and making it clear. I tell you, one of the things that I am excited about, especially for these smaller banking institutions like the smaller credit unions and banks, is being able to use something like the CIS 8 to where you can,
Sure.
to where, to where, because when you look at the FFIC CAT, I mean, it's written for banks that are 50 million up to 50 billion.
Right.
And
And
some
there's
of that
500
stuff,
questions in there.
yeah, and there's 500, yeah, there's 500 questions. And some of that stuff is just like, man, there is no way a bank under like 5 billion could afford to do some of that stuff or do all the due diligence involved with maintaining it correctly. Now they can check the box, but I mean, doing it to the spirit of the letter, as in what me or you
Yeah.
would say, hey, I feel good. I put my stamp on this. I'm good going forward on this. It's just impossible. Having something where you've got like, hey, here's the baseline for a smaller institution. Here's the one for a medium institution. Here's one for a
Right.
large institution. That is nice. And I think that will be beneficial.
Well, I mean, so I think this actually puts us in a spot to sort of like a transition here into what's I think bigger than how this conversation started, and that is when I look at all of the frameworks that are out there, and there's a lot, and they keep coming,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've had, FTC safeguards is relatively new. We got CMMC final ruling, going into effect in the coming, well, not too far out. And there's just all of the conversations have come back to what you just said based on the size of the organization, the capability of the organization is largely dictated by the resources that can be allocated or the money that can be allocated to, at least bring in third party. The capability doesn't say, you have to do this with your own staff of, allocate one of your 7 employees and get this done. Obviously, you can outsource and obviously this fits with where you're at in the role that you play as a consultant. But what I think is a commonality across all of these frameworks is they're trying to solve problems
Mm-hmm.
without targeting a specific business size or industry, right? Yes, FFIC obviously is very specific, but when you look at some of the others that are out there, they're targeting specific data types, not necessarily the industry that that business is serving. And so what I see happening, and I think this is where we have a big opportunity, is we need cyber hygiene to mature across all businesses. And I think when you look at the spirit of the frameworks that are out there and the goals that they largely have, it's to increase the protection and reduce
Hmm.
the probability of
Yeah.
exfiltration of data. And so that means that you have a lot of options now with maybe the cat, sort of going away in this context. And the reason I say that is if I am working with a small bank and they only have, let's say they're that sub 10 million, 20, 30 employees, maybe they're just a one-off regional bank, right? How do you go about helping them with that cybersecurity without it being like, well, this isn't in our budget? Yeah, no kidding. Maybe banking shouldn't be in your budget either. But when you start having the conversation, I don't know any business that's not intentionally in the cybersecurity space as their business that walks into the boardroom or the conference room on a Monday morning and is like, I think we should allocate 5% of our revenue to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? And that's the reality. Like if someone were to come in, say it was you coming in, say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but if you want to stay in business, you should be considering somewhere between 5 and 10% of your revenue should be allocated to a budget that improves your cybersecurity hygiene. And I think they would all laugh. Well, we don't have that kind of budget. Well, why not? Well, we have this and we have this and we have this. It's like, yes. But until I had this conversation with you, that wasn't even a consideration. And I think that's the piece that we desperately have to change. I think vendors have to help us with this. You mentioned Tandem, and it was funny before we got on this call. I literally just started laughing in my head. Like, how many tools could we talk about in a
Hmm.
30-minute conversation that is as many grains of sand as there are on a beach are the approaches to GRC. Um, like what for you as a consultant, what gets you excited about a GRC platform when you see it for the first time? What's a trigger for you to be like, hey, I want to explore this further?
Well, I mean, of course, for me, it's going to be like how 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 automated is it going to make things, and how much more efficient is it going to make my consulting business? So
Like from a data collection standpoint.
yes, from data
Okay.
collection, but also in risk categorization.
Okay.
That's that's super important. Also, just being able to manage it, the project management capabilities
Sure.
of the software. So the other
That's
thing is
three.
like, yeah, and being able to like, um,
How about cross
so
framework walks where I have an answer for a
yes,
safeguard and maybe get a prompt that says, "Hey, you answered a similar question. Would you like to see that answer?" And you're like, "Well, as a matter of fact, yes, I would."
yes, and also being able to add in your own risk.
Hmm.
So that's one that's not in a lot of them. Um, but being able to put in like, hey, this is not specific to every framework, but this is organizational specific. And it's something that's a high, like a critical risk that we need to take care of, or it's in our risk appetite statement. Being able to put something like that and then manage it with a short, midterm, and long term strategic goal,
Sure.
that that's also that's very nice. I mean, that's something that usually stands out to me, or would stand out to me.
I would add business impact analysis is often not found
Oh
in
yeah,
tools
yeah,
where you're
definitely,
like,
because that's rough, especially if you haven't done quite a few of them like you
right,
have, CJ. The I mean, the first time you do one, it's it's like eating an elephant. It's very
yeah.
intimidating.
Well, and the
And
questions that get asked, like what's the probability of flooding or fire or a lot of the natural disasters, and they're like, well, we have insurance for that. Well, that's maybe true, but like when we look at
but
what we're
still, it's
trying to
still going to
do,
happen.
yeah,
And
well,
do you have the
this,
offline procedures for when it does happen? Do you have
yeah,
the
like how,
communication ma management ready to tell everybody, hey, don't come in, or uh,
yeah, it might
this
be a
or
very different communication protocol for California than it is for
yeah,
Chicago, right, or
or for
Illinois.
like yeah, or for Miami.
And so with those things in mind, I often think that we're kind of talking about the low-hanging fruit. These aren't necessarily easy to have answers for, but they're at least realistically something that we can plan for because we understand what those things potentially look like. It's not the same as going, well, I think we're going to get ransomware through 365 on a Tuesday. It's going to hit Active Direct. Like those are not things that you can plan as easily for because they don't
Well,
have predictability.
now, I tell you, I did use a GRC platform in the past that actually did look at like you would put in your location and it would actually look up demographics, the the risk demographics for your area, and it would tell you, hey, this is a higher risk.
But that's on
Uh,
a much smaller scale than what we've seen in the broader
oh
GRC
yeah, yeah.
players that are out there. So we've highlighted the things that we say we want in a GRC platform. I bet for every five platforms we look at, we wouldn't get more than three of those things that we've listed. If we're lucky, we'd get
Or
three.
two,
Yeah,
probably two.
two. That's
Yeah,
fair.
because I mean it's a lot of work. So I mean I don't know. I think the I'm using Sonomi right now, and I'm really impressed with it.
That's a good
It
product.
does
Yeah, I've heard good things about that.
it is nice. It doesn't have everything in it. It doesn't have a lot of the customization in it.
Well, I
Uh,
think that's a good point to bring up. Like when you're looking at GRC tools, where's your area of expertise? Like if you're out there looking for a tool that helps you with CMMC and you land on a product that's really good with HIPAA compliance and that's their primary focus, that's probably not the right tool to use
mm-mm.
with the goals that you have for consulting or even as a business that needs to meet, those safeguard requirements. It This all makes me come all the way back to the
Yeah,
cat. And the reason why it does is the one thing that GRC tools really are not is their focus isn't as much on the gap analysis as it is on giving you the glorified spreadsheet to plug your answers in and then give you some sort of like output
yeah.
of like you've
Plan.
successfully completed this, yeah, or you need to put this into your poem. The CAT tool, the CIS, CSAT Lite, and CSAT Pro, those are all tools that are designed around you identifying where you have gaps specifically, as opposed to a just walk through and answer all 500 questions, right? Like, um,
You know, I can I amend my answer right quick on
yeah,
other things. The other
yes,
thing that would be so awesome is if they had the maturity model in like either 1 through 4, or it's implemented, it's partially implemented, it's documented, but it's not managed. It's
like
managed, maintained,
CSAT
and
does it.
measured. Yes.
They
If
have
they
like
had that,
seven.
that would and then take those into the risk score. Because I mean, if you've got, let's say something's very critical and you answered yes because you sort of do it in a sort of way, or you've got a third party that kind of does it, well, it's a lot higher critical risk if it's not being monitored, maintained, and measured.
Well, so let's ask that question. So you brought up a good one of like a way in which to do, I don't want to call it accurate scoring, but it's definitely accurate as
Or
far as
like
like
the
what they're
Have you
doing,
looked at
right?
that, like this, like ISACA's CMMI model maturity
Yes.
model? Yeah, like that. I mean, if you could do something like that, and then run that into the risk score and build the strategic plan uh, based off of criticality off of that, that'd be awesome.
And isn't that the same? That's the same as does that follow the same as NIST, the 1 through 5?
Yeah, it's exactly the same,
Okay.
or
So,
pretty
so
pretty much the same.
well, what bothers me is okay, so we've described a 5 point model, which is the NIST score, right? The 1 through 5. You've got, and I think 5 is like you are exceeding the requirements. It's a very mature model. It walks you through like ad hoc, documented, but not automated, some of that stuff. And obviously there's some things you can't automate.
Yeah,
And
or it's
then,
done, but it's not documented.
right. And then that gets into like now you talk about like the CIS model when you look at do you have a policy? It's like informal, not documented, formal, or sorry, yeah, documented, not, so on and so forth, right? And then you can put not applicable. CMMC is another one. What they have the 3 point model where it's like, or maybe you can have it in your poem if it's a one. You can't have it in your poem if it's. I mean, there's so many things that are out there right now from a maturity standpoint. I think at the end of the day, when I'm looking at the maturity process, I want to have a clear picture on, and I would even approach this from like more of like the standards-based grading model. Partially or does not meet, meets, or exceeds. And that's it.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Because everything beyond meeting a safeguard from a compliance standpoint has gone from objective to subjective, right? That's your interpretation of what they've shown you. Let's just say, fill in the blank, tool that you're using for the authentication becomes no longer a security best practice. Or you don't like the app that they're using. You don't like the password manager that they're using. Okay, so now Can you maintain the objective when you go beyond meeting the requirement that they're using a password manager and go, well, you used this one, they had a breach last year, they were compromised this way. I'm not going to give you an exceeds. I'm going to say meets, and you're going to need to do more. And you're like, wow, that's centrally managed. I didn't even ask them for that. Like, we can go back to this model that says nothing we do is going to be measurable consistently across more than one assessor because, and we see that, right? What
Yeah, we do see
organization
that.
wants a different assessor the next time around? They don't. Generally speaking, if you're paying to have a third party assess you in year two and year three, you're like, oh, let's just go switch assessors. Let's get a different company in here. Let's see what they say. And then you're like, oh, it's worse. Awesome. More work for us, right? Like, I'm not saying you never do that, but like you're hiring them to
But that
help
does
you
follow best
mature.
practice. You shouldn't use the same assessor
Right.
after three
Fair.
years.
Correct. But along those lines, I think if we could really help this model, materialize where it's like, no, our goal is, are you meeting the requirement first and foremost? If not, is there a trajectory that you're
And a
on?
definition of meeting the requirement.
Correct. And that you are on a path at some point that has a clear picture that is measurable to when it will be implemented, not like, yeah, we're looking to do that in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, that's not realistic.
Mm-mm.
And then the third one would be you're exceeding it, right? Like, I mean, when someone starts to exceed the requirements, do you really need to keep measuring them to see if they're making it go up higher? Or do you need to just keep track of like where they're at and so it doesn't go down? Or let
I
them
would
know
think
when
that
something goes down.
once they meet or exceeds, I feel like I always used to tell my guys, hey, let's focus where the risk is the greatest.
That's
Now,
right.
if we've got our attack surface where it's lowered right here, and I don't, I want you to keep it maintained, keep it managed, keep it measured. But if we've got this vulnerability and a hole in the fence over here, we need to
Yeah.
patch that thing. We need to get it back up to where it's on the same level as these other ones. So yeah, I think once you hit meet or exceed, you need to focus on. There's always higher risk somewhere else.
Well, right, and the ecosystem is always changing. I think about like I live where there's
Yes.
lots of fence lines, right? Whether it's for corn or for cows or pigs, whatever it is. And I had someone tell me this. They're like, you don't you don't just go and patch the fences where the animals are. You have to make sure you patch the fences where the animals are not, because at some
Hmm.
point in time, you're going to need to move those cows or those whatever into another pasture. And if it's not being maintained, you may be letting them loose into an environment that they just kind of all randomly disappear out of the fences
Yes.
because you didn't
Or die.
realize it's open.
Yeah. Yeah. They.
So,
But but yeah, back to the cat. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just
no,
that the
it's
maturity
just,
thing was like that's something that has
I
always interested me.
honestly, I think that's probably, if there's one thing for the audience to take away is you have to come up with a maturity model if one is not being defined for you. And it needs to be one that you agree upon with the client you're working with to say, hey, I know you have to meet or exceed the requirements that are in this framework, and we're going to go and approach this from the standpoint of you are not meeting it, you are partially meeting it. Those are still the same score, I think. It's just more of like if someone's partially meeting a safeguard, I think they need to be aware of it because that usually means it's a lesser of a lift to get to meeting the safeguard than to just be like, yep, you have a gap there. You're at zero.
Yeah, if
Um,
meeting is three, then partial needs to be two.
Fair. So we give you, well, I'd give you a zero for not meeting it, like a zero if you're
Yeah.
not doing anything.
Okay,
So
so
zero,
one,
zero, one, two, we'll just do zero, one, two, three. So zero is you have nothing in place. A one is you're partially meeting the safeguard. So like I could see things like where you might have MFA to remote in, but you don't necessarily have, MFA on everything in the ecosystem. I would say
yeah,
it's a
you've got
partial.
two other SaaS that have PII in it, but you're not using MFA on those.
Right. And so you have some work to do. Meets means that everywhere that it should be happening, it's happening. And then exceeds is probably getting into the way in which you're meeting the safeguard goes beyond the actual minimum requirements of what's asked of the safeguard. We're getting into best practices, right? And I think
Hmm.
any organization that's going through an assessment cycle, if their approach is to do this with that in mind, then I think most organizations will meet or exceed over time uh, almost any framework. And I think that goes back to the cat, right? Like it's asking, yes, it's 500 questions, but at the end of the day, it's not that it's 500 questions is the problem. It's that many organizations, without hiring a third party, especially the smaller
Don't know how to
ones,
answer it sometimes.
don't know how to answer it, or they can answer it, but they don't have the means to put the what's asked of them into their own environment. It's either they don't know how to transition to say maybe a compensating control or a
Mhm.
roadmap that has it in the budget for a future date that is realistic, like not 5 years out.
Yeah, or how to do it within the budget without spending a crazy amount of money because they're hearing different salesmen tell them different things that you have to do this, you have to do that. There's ways to get around those things. It's just like, man, I'm sure you've looked at somebody's cybersecurity insurance questionnaire and they wrote yes on everything, and you're just like, man, you are not doing this. I know somebody may have told you that you're doing this, but you're not doing this.
Well, this could be a whole other episode, but like I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
when
yeah,
you
yeah.
when
I keep
when you look at questionnaires, I think sometimes it's easy to put down the answer yes or no, depending on the question, because the question for someone who has never read it before assumes that it's asking them about one thing. And in some cases, it naturally is. In many cases, though, it's asking you to satisfy, half a dozen things that your yes is looking at. So, you know, it puts us, as we go to wrap up, one of the things that comes to mind about what you said as far as factoring into budget, there's a lot of open source tools out there that allow you to meet requirements that are in frameworks. And I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, "Oh, well, we're using this free tool over here, or we're using this over here." Or maybe they found a paid product that is, super low cost and they're going to put that in. But I come back to this one question: somewhere in the equation, there is a cost burden, and it's either happening
could
on
be
the
technical debt.
checkbook or it's on, yep, that's the third one. So I was thinking, so you have technical debt, could be one, like what's it built on? Does it integrate? Does it have the means to carry you over the next however long? The second
How
one
much does it
is
take to maintain and manage it?
maintain. That would have been my second one. And then of course the third one is, can I write a check for it and solve for those other two things not being problematic? Because I think there are cases where you can, like sometimes a bigger transaction on the checkbook, another zero in there might be brand new tech, or you're truly outsourcing, so it's not managed by your
Or
staff.
managed solution where they're actually taking care of everything that you need.
Right. So I think those three, every product service you look at, consider those three things. I think you'll do just fine. Any other thoughts you have? Obviously, we kind of circled away and back to the cat a few times.
I have definitely sent us down 12 different roads, and I'm sorry for that, CJ. But the
That's okay. There's a lot of roads to travel.
yes, it is. The maybe we can do a follow-up
For sure.
show sometime. The I think that mainly it's not always expensive to do so. Sometimes there's just common sense controls that you can do that may be not as convenient, but still cost effective. And you can put it in there, and it's going to take care of the risk that you're trying to mitigate. But also, FFIEC, you need to put out some further some further documentation on what needs to be done, what is meets, what is not meets, what is
Yeah.
partial, um, and help these because I think about the MSPs that are managing banks right now, not only in the IT departments that are doing that, and talk about the flip side, the examiners and regulators that are going to have to go in next year and start doing the assessments on these banks without
Yeah.
without solid concrete information on the direction that they need to go. That's
Well,
the
and I,
that's the thing, like you said, when you get these different regulators and one of them's like super duper tough or interprets it a completely different way than it has been interpreted the last three times you've done it, and it's hard to argue with them about it, then that's a bad place to be.
well, we've seen this before with Sarbanes-Oxley, right? And some of the other
Yeah.
auditors where it's like, I need to see a screenshot, when you make changes to Active Directory so that we know that bad things didn't happen. And I'm thinking, well, if I'm taking the screenshot, I probably wouldn't be doing bad things, right? Like, I'm only going to include the good stuff, like if I'm manually doing this. And obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
we've gotten to a place where there's a lot of automation to solve for that. But like, there are flaws in every framework that we can exploit from I don't have to do that, or, we're just doing this thing to show how we're meeting it. But if we're following, going back to that scoring model that we talked about, I think if that's the intent, if as an organization you're working with those to help you achieve a goal that says, I want to get to a place where we meet or exceed, this will be a far safer place.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when you talk to individuals, do you usually push a maturity model? Because I enjoy using them. I feel like it makes the communication to the board and the executive team and the IT team, it makes it a lot easier to explain to them, hey, this is where you're at and this is where we need to be.
So yes and no. So I like the scoring model. I don't care if it's a letter grade. I don't care if it's a point system. I don't care if you're using, verbiage like we said, partial, fully, etc. What I have a problem with is using scoring of any kind on the first time through. So, and the reason being is every time you do a gap analysis, there's gaps, right? And some of those gaps are significant. I very rarely see where it's just a handful, it's just a little bit. It's very rare. And what you don't want to have happen is to have the conversation with the client or the client's board of directors where it's like, wow, that's really bad. Please don't show that to
Hmm.
anybody. Let's fix it all and then do it again. And you're like, well, that doesn't create for a very clear baseline because we've basically made your baseline almost to a state of perfection. And
Yeah,
as
you've
soon as
got to
we
get that baseline speech before you even
Exactly.
start
So I like
saying,
saying,
hey,
hey,
this
these
is
are
just
just
a,
a starting
hey,
point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, hey, we've been out of shape for 20 years. This is the first jog.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
Like we're
we're
not going to have
just
you get on the
we're about to
scales
hit
on
the
day
road.
one.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think that's, if you had a goal tomorrow of like, hey, you're going to go run a marathon, I don't think the requirement is to go
exactly.
find
That's
out how
perfect.
much you weigh.
Perfect analogy. Yeah. We're not going to time ourselves on that first run.
No. And I think that's to your point. Yes, I love doing the maturity to help them recognize that they're making progress, they're moving forward, they're seeing reds turn to greens. All of that matters. But I think if you start with that being where you're like your blood pressure's too high. Well, no kidding, I wouldn't have called you if it wasn't
Hmm.
problematic with my blood pressure. But like those are not good ways to get started because you start with then that deflated, paralysis. You just don't want to do anything at all. It's depressing.
Yeah. And where do you go?
And right, and where do you go? And I think that would be my number one thing to get feedback on is scoring's great once you've had a chance to get the ball rolling and they see, especially when they have easy wins and they see that something's been changed from a red to a green or, a yellow to a green or something along those lines. I think if you start with you scored 25% out of 100, so you might as well not even try.
Yeah. No, I always start with the strategic roadmap after we do the assessment and then say, hey, let's not even look at where we're at.
Yeah.
Let's look at these top three critical ones. Let's come up with a plan on how we're going to address these and let's let that be our focus. We'll work on these other ones as we go along this journey, but these are the ones that we've got to focus on so that we can lower that attack surface.
Well, and sometimes you can't predict what a fix will actually change, right? So I have
Hmm.
seen times where like you fix three or four super low-hanging fruit, really is not even going to impact your score overall because they were low, only to find out that those fixes actually change like
Yeah.
25 or 30 things throughout the
Yes.
organization. So
Yeah.
that's the other reason why not to go in with setting expectations of how good or bad you might do after fixing one or two things. But to your point, whether they're three highly critical items or maybe they're just you go, I know this is such an easy win. We're going to change the lock screen to 15 minutes from 45. And boom, you've addressed, eight or nine other things that were underlying concerns without having it be because if you have change happen too fast, sometimes you just get so much pushback. The friction has, shadow IT comes into play and you've got bigger problems
Yes.
than closing
Yes.
holes in the gaps.
Because if you're the other thing, and you know this as well as I do, is hey, security is important, but business strategy and business enablement is even more important. There is no reason for security if there is no business. So you've
Well,
got you've got to support them and be creative to put in controls that lower that risk while they're able to make money and do what they need to do to make things happen. I mean, that's just the way it is. And if you don't, If you use a iron fist,
Yeah,
like you said, shadow IT is going to come into place because they will, where there's a will, there's a way, and they will
that's
find
right.
a way to get
They
around that
will.
security control.
Absolutely. They have their own goals and KPIs that they have to meet, and it's not
Yeah,
tied to
yeah, and
cybersecurity.
they got to put
That's
food
right.
on the plate.
Well,
And they don't care as much about that. That's why it's important to find out what the business strategy is and tailor your security recommendations towards that while maintaining. And anybody that's worth their stuff, I mean, you can find a way to be creative, control risk, and
sure.
still let them make money and do what they need to do.
Well, there you have it, everybody. This has been an episode of MSP 1337. Dan, thanks for being on the show, and for
I
everybody else,
appreciate you. Thanks, CJ.
have a happy Thanksgiving.
Take care, man.